Welcome
And
to
we're live.
the Lab Coat Experience. This is podcast number 6, and today we learn. We have a guest, the usual guest. His name is Josh Renademan. Hey, Josh, how you doing?
I'm hungry. I'm doing great. I'm chowing down on some chicken wings.
I heard
They're
you
cold.
slept a lot today.
I mean, by a lot, I got 8 hours of sleep. Yeah, it was amazing. Yeah.
What do you mean, 8 hours? You did it, bro.
Yeah, I know. It's like I should have an achievement.
Ding. Average sleep
Seriously.
time achieved.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Morgan's, what is it today, Monday? 39 weeks and 1 day. So we're full term. So she could have baby anytime.
Damn.
And, so, I mean, there's just lots of small stuff that get done around the house. The dads out there, they know. Maybe. And, yeah, I got off a little early yesterday. So I was able to get home, work on some articles, and today I'm going to get the programming stuff done that Cole's waiting on.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
And soon you'll become Nader Dad.
Yeah, soon I become Nader Dad.
Well, Nader Dad, we have a bunch of other children who have a lot of questions.
Nader Dad Jr.
Yeah. Well, we got a bunch of questions from the community, and it's
Awesome.
our job to answer those questions. So, without any further ado,
by the way,
Oh,
just
yeah.
because I got 8 hours of sleep doesn't mean I'm fully recovered. But I'm feeling okay. I'd like to let our friend Cody know that I'm sure he's seen the post in the lab, but he asked a question, and during the discussion, I told him, obviously he wasn't right here.
Yeah.
But he has two questions, and one of them, said, well, it's not a good question. And what I should have said is that the question was not formed completely. I had no direction as to specifically what was being asked, so it was a very hard question to answer because it wasn't specific. And so then I went into detail about what the deal was. And basically, he was asking about if you get the same strength benefits from weighted handstand push-ups as you do a 90-degree push-up. And it doesn't really make a lot of sense because there's such incredibly different movements, right? Like, what do you mean? What kind of strength are we talking about? Because, and so, what I think he was getting at is handstand push-up stuff. And the way that I would address that is that I would say, well, in a handstand push-up, all you're using is your body weight. And basically the last part of the 90-degree push-up is a handstand push-up with just your body weight. So that's really what you're limited to in terms of overhead pressing strength gains. And then with a weighted handstand push-up, you can just keep adding weight forever. So as far as overhead pressing stuff and basic strength goes, the weighted handstand push-up would be substantially better. The other thing is that, the 90 degree is a highly skilled movement. You're balancing, you're moving through multiple different movement patterns. And so you're transitioning from basically a handstand push-up to a planche push-up is really what you're doing. So those are your two movements. And sort of in the middle, you could say that you kind of have a mid-range incline press and with a very small range of motion, right? And so there's three different things that we could break that down into. And each of those movements individually is really all that you need to build everything for multiple reps of 90-degree push-ups without wasting your time on a lot of specific progressions. And that's basically how Yad built up his. And they're some of the best that I've seen. And it didn't take a lot of professional, it didn't take a lot of effort. And so, there's not, the reason that I'm mentioning all this is that, it was rude of me to say it was a bad question because that just kind of carte blanche says, or at least the listener hears, why'd you ask that, dummy? And that's not very nice. That's not the message that I want to send.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I do want to make sure that we say, okay, when you ask a question, be real specific. Tell me what are you looking for out of the answer? If you just ask, is basketball a good sport? I'm just gonna start leaving those questions completely alone. I'm gonna say this question needs to be asked more specifically. Until it does, we're just moving on, and that's just what we'll have to do because you know there's not. Yeah, I mean, what do you want me to say to that? That is a bad question. That would be a bad question because it has nowhere to go. You know what I'm saying? It's just like, where do you want to go eat? I don't know. Somewhere with warm food. Thanks, asshole.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
We try our best to
those
find
are the questions that we don't want.
Yeah, we try our best to find out what you're actually asking, and then if we don't end up answering the question you wanted, then we tried. That's
well, and here's what you got to remember: we're not live with the members. This isn't a forum podcast, right? There's only two of us, and we're reading something off of a piece of paper. And so, if that piece of paper doesn't have everything that we need to know what you're thinking, it's very hard to be a mind reader. And so, maybe this whole explanation thing is going to upset people. I'm not really sure why, but it might. The goal really is just to say, look, I think that we know what you're getting at, and I would just want to point out the difference between a very open-ended question and a question with a pointed direction. And we really, it's better for you and it's better for us to give us very pointed questions, like which one of these two things is going to have is going to be better for what? Like, is some exercise going to be better for specific strength in a certain area or whatever? And you just want to make sure that when somebody else reads it, they know exactly what you're asking. And it shouldn't be a fitness person. A well-structured question can be, even if somebody doesn't have the knowledge to answer it, they can clearly see what is being asked, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Basically, the more specific
that's what I want.
The more specific you ask your question, the more specific we can answer. And so you can expect more wide answers, more open answers the moment the question is more open. So that's what we're getting at, basically.
It makes the podcast work better because then I can actually give you what you need.
Exactly.
If I'm just picking a direction, it could go anywhere and it might be interesting and there's time for that, but it's not going to give the person what they want. And I'm here to give you what you want, I just need to know what it is. Yeah. And, opinion questions and things are totally different. I mean, sometimes by nature, those are opinions. Like, who do you think's the best, even there, like, I don't know. I don't spend time on YouTube, man. I barely have time to do this. But, yeah, I mean, other people have opinions on that, I think they're a little bit silly, but they're still fun to look at. And other people don't think they're silly. And so other people are probably better to answer those questions.
All right, man.
Not the best at everything.
Let's get to the questions.
All right.
That first we question. Have. The first question, Alexander Chaney. He says, for those of us who got into advanced bodyweight training, out of the mindset that it is more applicable to athleticism. How do you pronounce it? Then weight training, where we misled, or is there some truth to that? So basically,
you're largely misled.
Okay. So wait, let's first define what athleticism.
Yeah.
I have articulation problems every now and then. Sometimes I have days where I just cannot speak properly.
My wife does the same thing. It's funny.
Yeah, I think she did. But it's
you
like
just gotta have fun with it. I mean,
some days I'm like Shakespeare. Some other days I'm like, how did you learn to speak English?
Right. So athleticism is one of those terms that's kind of along the lines of delicious. What the hell does that mean? It's something different for each sport, just like it's something different to each person eating food. We don't always agree. Now, having said that, athleticism does have some very broad limitations to how far you can take the definition. So, like, by nature, it means qualities inherent to an athlete, or qualities that you would expect to see in an athlete, qualities of an athlete that make them good at their sport. right? So if you're not defining what sports you're looking at, then we're kind of having a hard time going anywhere with it. So there isn't really a lot of accepted definitions for athleticism, but if we were going to say broadly, it would mean that you move efficiently in the ways that you're trying to move, and that you can be better than average at the things that require that somebody needs to be good at their sport. So for example, athleticism for a tennis athlete is very different than athleticism for track and field, right? Tennis tennis
Hey, it's
athletes,
contagious.
man, going back to the corner COVID days. That's for the old people listening. The So a tennis player is almost exclusively performing lateral movements, and a movement very similar to a baseball pitch in some ways. Not really, but kind of, which is the overhead serve. And then they're doing backhands and forehands. So they're doing a lot of those two motions, right? Where I'm just going to scoot back for a little bit, where you're basically horizontal adduction of the shoulder and pronation of the wrist, and also coming through and horizontal abduction or abduction of the shoulder and supination of the wrist. Those are your two major movements in tennis with the arm, and the third being the serve. And so a tennis player needs those three things. But one of the things that is common to almost all athletics is, and when I say like athletics, I mean like really good athletes in general, is that they have the ability to generate and maintain a very stiff core, because that allows the transfer from the upper body, from the power generated from the legs to the arms, and vice versa, to be transferred with a minimum of loss. And it is how good punchers punch harder. It is how good hitters hit harder. There's even with like the golf swing, the more that you're pivoting through the hips and the less that you're pivoting through the spine, the more powerful your swing is. And that's because the trunk muscles have nowhere near the ability to generate torque as the leg muscles and the shoulder girdle muscles. So all your core is supposed to do is stay super duper stiff, and everything else is supposed to move around it. And if you're trying to generate your swing with your core, you're always going to be weaker and not hit as far, not have the power in your shots that you really should have. And that's something that people don't know. So that would be one of the big ones. Everything else that's one of the few that's truly common between all sports, more or less.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Everything else is a little bit more difficult to get specific on. As far as the question for bodyweight athletes, I'm going to go with the common definition of field sports. In bodyweight stuff, you are never going to develop the kind of lower body hip girdle, calf power and strength that you can develop with weights ever. So not weight training puts you at an inherent disadvantage. As far as upper body stuff goes, it really depends on what you're trying to do. For certain things, there's still a little bit of a disadvantage, but I think that there's a lot more adaptability when it comes to the body weight stuff. The big limitation is that it's a lot harder for bigger athletes to do that stuff safely and to scale it effectively.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit more applicable to smaller athletes. The big problem is that a fair number of sports, especially like football, you really do need the weights, because what you are doing is you have a big weight in front of you, which is a player, and then you have a big weight underneath you, which is the earth. And you are trying to you're trying to push against both those things at the same time. You know what I'm saying? When you're trying to move around and hitting somebody and things like that, especially for linemen. So, like, if a lineman's not doing incline press, then they're just not on point. There's other things they need to be doing, but that needs to be in there. And, it's because when they come up That's the incline press. You're getting up under the pads and like blocking somebody, dude. That's an incline press.
Yeah.
Every punch is an incline press. How do you do that well with body weight? You can. It's just it requires a huge amount of coordination, and it requires a lot of strength. You're limited on the range of motion unless you get parallettes, and then you can get so far down that if you're not very good at sort of self-regulating your efforts, you're going to fall on your face a lot. I mean, there's a lot of disadvantages to trying to do it that way. And it doesn't mean it can't be successful. It just means that it's a lot harder. It's harder to scale, and it's harder to sort of bring yourself along in a controlled, safe fashion. It can be done. It's just more challenging. Does that make sense?
It makes sense.
I wouldn't. Yeah. So I mean, that's really
that's it.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
The only thing where for lower body where there is an advantage for doing a body weight thing is Nordic curls, which some people also know as natural leg curls.
They're so hard.
Yeah, so it's an eccentric oriented movement, and that's really the part that's most beneficial to it, and it does help prevent hamstring tears. That's being validated more and more in strength and conditioning research. That was a big thing in 2018. There was a lot written on that, and a couple years prior, but really 2018 was a big one for Nordic curls. So I think Ido Portal used to call them hair-up curls. I don't know why. Everybody seems to find it.
Now that you mentioned him, the next question is about Ido Portal.
Okay.
So might as well,
that's really funny.
Yeah, we might as well just talk about him now.
For people who don't know, I never know what questions are coming. Yad's the only one who knows.
I'm the only one. And I don't even prepare. I just write them down. I'm like, oh, this is a question. So we're both like unprepared. I just saw Ido Portal right there. Like, let's right on my screen. So this question is from Christian Nogueira. He says, what is your view of exercises which work the joints at odd movements, such as popularized by Ido Portal's improper alignment video? Also, some of Sommer's mobility work, etc. Is it useful at all?
In limited circumstances. That was a big thing in the late 2000s, like from 2009 to 2013. There was a period of time where people were in love with that. One of the things that I would really keep in mind is that a lot of this stuff, time will tell, right? And when you see these things kind of disappear, and then they're gone for a couple of years, and then some new white guy comes up doing all the same stuff that Ido used to do, which is starting to happen now. It's a marketing thing. It looks cool. Ido learned a lot of it from Coach Sommer. I've run across a fair bit of it actually in capoeira. So he may have also picked some stuff up there. But so I don't know if that's the first place he saw it or what. It doesn't really matter. Ido was one of the first people to really bring it out into the public and talk a lot about it.
By the way, for the people who don't know what we're talking about, it's basically training in.
It's like walking on the side of your ankles, right?
Yeah,
so
that will be one of the examples. So like basically things that could ranges of motion that could possibly injure you. He wants you to be strengthened in those positions.
Yeah, there's some inherent disadvantages. So we're going to compare two things here. One is strengthening the muscles that prevent you from going into those ranges of motion. And the other is stretching and then loading the stretches, because if you really want to be honest, that's all that it is.
Yeah.
To then walk around in an alignment that would often result in a twisted ankle, right? Which is really the common term for a low-grade ligamentous tear of the ankle, usually on the outside of it. So the problem with doing a lot of that stuff is that it can make it easier to roll when you don't mean to roll. So, The people that it's really good for are martial artists, because especially people who use the side kick. Because if you can turn your ankle like that and hit somebody with what we call the blade of the heel, which is not a real thing, but it's essentially the outside of the calcaneus. You're concentrating a high amount of force in a small area, which creates huge pressure, which makes it easy to knock people out and break their ribs. So that's highly desirable. It's something that really only gets developed by good karate and taekwondo people, more so karate, because taekwondo tends to use more hook kicks and tricky roundhouses. Everybody's got things that they kind of specialize in. So I'm not saying they don't use those real nice side kicks, but there's some differences in preference that people use, because that one is used to slip under the chin and crush the thyroid cartilage and kill you. So there's people who are going to say, "Oh, nobody can do that." Man, I used to. Don't get me started, but yeah, well, there's some things that people don't realize. Like they think certain things are not practical, and it's like, well, by itself, if you just throw it at somebody, no, it's not practical. But when you're throwing like jab, jab, cross, and then you slip, throw a body punch, and then all of a sudden your heel comes right up under their jaw, that's extremely practical. So it's just a question of whether you're a good fighter or not. As far as the question goes, I think for the ankle stuff, it's a little bit less controversial, to be honest with you. It's a little more of a difficult area to comment on in the knees. If you already have, so like the inside and the outside squats, which if you search those, you'll see things. What these are is extreme valgus and varus tension, which means that the knee's bowing out and the knee's buckling in, and that you sort of squat down a little and then eventually sort of go all the way down and all the way up. Now, I used to be able to do this without a problem. I've got damaged cartilage, the meniscus in my right knee, so I don't mess with any of that stuff anymore. I think that it's such a fringe thing. I don't think that in any way it is necessary or hugely protective, but it can be a lot of fun. And I do think that it could offer some protective value, because you are basically temporarily putting stress on the ligaments, and then you spend the rest of the day not putting stress on them. So you've stimulated them to grow thicker. Whether that actually happens or not, we would have to have serial MRIs done over long periods of time with consistent training to demonstrate that, because it's possible that it could thicken those ligaments over a number of months or years and make you a little more injury resistant. So I think that if you're healthy, then they're fine. As long as you take it slow and are careful and you don't do too much. 2-3 times a week is really all that should be done there. Some people will do more. It causes some people problems. Some people it doesn't cause problems. So there's a lot of your mileage may vary in that answer. And I know we kind of went over a few different areas, but that's kind of the long and the short of it, is that no, it's not something that should be very high on your list. Yes, it could potentially cause problems, but if you approach it intelligently and have a good time, you probably will not have problems. Now, what I was mentioning is a comparison is like, instead of walking on the side of your ankle, like I'm scooting back in my chair now and just lifting my foot up. So like, instead of walking on the side of my ankle here, what if I was just doing strengthening for those muscles, right? You are not going to sprain your ankle. I've actually taken gymnasts who, there's one kid, he was, I think, 8 or 9 at the time, and he's my favorite example. He had such heavily taped ankles, and he hurt, and he was a good kid too. He was really good. He's a really nice kid, very good tumbler. He's pretty strong, honestly, and his mom was super sweet. And so one day, we were just talking and showing some stuff, and they were unwrapping his ankles, and I was just like, why is what's going on? And so they told me, and he just has terrible ankles. And I said, well, let me show you something. And so I showed them how to use some resistance bands to properly strengthen this. And there's a way that you do a slip around the ankle there, and so that you can get the proper torque across the joint, so that you can actually strengthen the muscles that you want. And I saw him a couple months later because the gymnastics club didn't always go to the same gym. In terms, like, this is when I was messing around with the Georgia Tech gymnastics team and like the club, like the intramural, whatever, I don't know.
Yeah.
And so we saw him a couple months later, and his mom was just super excited. It's like we don't have to tape his ankles anymore. His ankles don't hurt, and he was better. He was tumbling higher. He was feeling great, and it just kept continuing like that. And so he didn't need more motion. What he needed was more stability. And I would always caution you that when you go into things like this, you've got to have the stability. And one of the things that a lot of these people don't always, tell you is, and they sometimes they don't realize themselves, is that, once you're already stable, you can really approach a lot of mobility stuff safely. That would be a bad idea if you're just going for pure range of motion. You have to have strength and control in it. So anyways, that's a long answer for that.
Yeah.
But it's also an unusual topic, and I wanted to kind of cover a lot of different things there and give an example and sort of show a preview of things that down the line we'll be teaching. It's just a question of what's most important, and that's just not at the top of the list.
All right, next question by Nicholas Masman. He asks, what are your thoughts on a minimum effective volume, maximum recoverable volume, as per Mike Israetel, and moving from one to the other in a cycle? The mass cycles seem to fit these concepts quite well. He's talking about our mass cycles.
Right. Well, I think that Mike Israetel is responsible for one of the most important sets of vocabulary in effective strength and conditioning. He's a very, very smart man. He's obviously a beast. And he's put his time in the lab, in business, and in the gym. And, one of the things that even like he'll tell you, if you listen to a lot of his stuff, I'm a big fan. And, I've said a lot of this stuff myself over the years, but he's developed a much more specific vocabulary that I use because I think that it's a good vocabulary. There are a few terms that I use that make it a little more specific, but, it's like 99% similar. And it's a good thing. So as far as moving from minimum effective to maximum recoverable, you don't want to do that. What you want to do is you want to be moving from minimum effective to maximum adaptive. There's a big difference. Maximum adaptive. So we've shown this in diagrams before.
Yeah, in the last, I think 2 podcasts ago too.
Yeah. If the maximum recoverable volume is all the way on the right and the minimum effective volume is all the way on the left, and then when the maximum recoverable volume means that you are literally at your limit. That's not what's making you grow the most. That is literally the limit of what your body is capable of recovering from without breaking down. And that means that you're doing so much damage that your resources are basically all going into damage control and damage repair, and not very much is left over for growth. So you can probably imagine that means you're not going to grow as well as if you had dialed it back just a little bit to stay in a zone just to the left, around 80, 90% of that maximum recoverable. And that usually is where, and somebody's going to quote me on those percentages, they're just for visual purposes. It's different for everybody. And it's different during your training career. And so when you get a little bit over, so instead of being like all the way over here, you're sort of in this, 70, 80, 90% range of your maximum recoverable volume compared to the minimum effective.
Mm-hmm.
That's usually your maximum adaptive volume. That's where you need to be to get the best results from your training. And what happens is that over time, especially in more experienced athletes who have several years of training under their belt, there does seem to be where even when you stay there, the response kind of slows down a little bit. And that's where you kind of have to back off and go to a lower volume, or even take a couple of weeks off once a year and just let your body forget about what it feels like to be trained. And then you come back and it's very sensitive again. And you recover everything that you lost within like the first 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And then you tend to make better progress for a little while. And then eventually you're gonna go through your cycles and you're gonna vary the volume up and down so that your body has a chance to kind of hit the ideal parameters quite a bit. And eventually you have to do the same thing again. And the reason that you can't just target the maximum adaptive volume directly is that we don't have a good way of measuring what it is. What Mike often does, from what I've seen, and he would have to comment on this to really make it like, official or whatever, but he goes through waves that he knows are going to go a little bit past maximum adaptive, because we don't have a good way to hit it right on the bullseye. But we know that if we start a little bit low and go a little bit high, we're going to spend a good bit of our time right where we want to be. And the rest of it isn't that far off. And we're not going past the point of return. You know what I mean? So what I'm saying is that it means that we're able to get everything in a good place where we know we're getting good training.
Okay.
And that's why you'll see a lot of really everybody who has good programming is going to have a variation of these buildups in volume and then resets. What we do is we take things a little bit slower so that it gives us more time in that maximum adaptive area, and it makes it harder to immediately push past. Those are kind of what I call flavor options. All the right things are there. I just take my own spin on how to stay there and how to stay there longer. And I think that's why so many of our people have such excellent results. But how important is that? It's a great question. We don't have good research to tell us. I just know that it's an easy way to progress the way that we do it. It doesn't take a lot of energy. It doesn't compared to other things. There's a lot of different ways to get those volume waves. I just go for the one that creates the least fatigue while retaining the results.
Yeah.
But
all
yeah,
right, man.
the short answer is that it's the vocab is great. I love Dr. Israetel's work. He's a super cool guy.
He's a dope dude. I met him this weekend.
Yeah, Yad and Cole got a chance to go over and attend one of their seminars.
He's just as tall as me, but then he's like 35 kilo more lean mass.
He's huge.
And the weird thing is his wrists and ankles are like same size as me. So, and I have very, very thin wrists and ankles. And I was like, how do you pack so much muscle? You're such a beast.
Yeah, well, it's the juice. And he doesn't make any secrets about that. And
but still, it's still impressive.
Well, no, and that's the thing though. It's not just the juice; it's the work. The juice just lets you recover from the work.
Yeah,
that's the thing, and that's what people don't understand is that these guys who are, taking it as far as they can go by using the super supplements, steroids. They're working harder than all the rest of us. They can recover from that. They are. You know what I'm saying? Like the ones that are successful. And so, I don't personally think that it's not my favorite, direction to say people should go, because I think that there's a lot of additional health risks, and realistically, it's not, the risk reward isn't there. But for some people it is, and some people don't care. And honestly, who gives a shit? His body is a testament to years and years and years of his iron will and good science. And he brings a lot of people to great places that don't use any of that stuff. And that's the most important thing. It's easy to find reasons to shit on people, but you should be looking for whether or not they are able to get other people where those people want to go. And if those people are like you, then you should probably be listening.
All right, man. Next question by Demetris Mannouris. He says, thank you for answering my forearm splint question on podcast 4. I have been following the advice for the ulnar deviations, compression, and extensor strengthening, and it has helped immensely. Once the injury is fully healed, how can I go back to training planche without the fear of aggravating it again? Before putting a planche on hold for rehab, I could hold a straddle planche for 5 seconds. So,
Well,
yeah. You want to tackle that?
yeah, I mean, first thing is use wrist wraps.
Yes.
I don't know why people are so resistant to that. It's a pride thing. I used to be one of those people.
Well, bruh, aren't your wrists going to get weak?
No.
Bruh.
That's always the thing. It's like the knee wrap thing too, man. You're just fucking cheating, man. Like, bro, go pull on that knee wrap. It doesn't lift very much weight. And here's the thing. Even if it adds 12 extra pounds to the bar, if I make 50 pounds of squat gains over the next 3 months, not saying I would, but just saying what if, right? 6 months. That knee wrap didn't get stronger, dude. You did. Come on. Put that shit to rest.
True.
You know what I mean?
And it's a tool. People forget it's a tool.
Yeah. And here's the way that you use the wrist wraps is that some people are always going to have problems. Not everybody was made to just be a beast without wraps. That's why humans made shoes, man. It's not weak to wear shoes. It's smart to wear shoes. That's why they stuck around.
What are you talking about?
Yeah, go get some trench rot. See how you do. Go walk down medieval streets barefoot. Okay, people put animal skins on their feet for a reason. The Native Americans wore them for a reason. They were about as natural as you could get. And one of the natural things they did was put extra skin on their feet. And that's just important to understand. You know what I mean? Is that it's a tool, like you said. It's an extra support device. And as you move forward through the months, you can always loosen it up a little bit.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be on or off. It can be on 100% tightness and then 95% tightness and then 90 and then 85. And you may find a point where below it, you just start having problems. So just use the wrap. It's crazy.
Just use the wrap. Keep doing the exercises.
Yeah. Do you want to be strong or not? Yeah. That's kind of what it comes down to. And if you want to be strong, you use the tools that let you train.
That's it.
Yeah.
I use it. So when I'm doing a skill cycle or something, I tend to use wrist wraps a lot. And then every now and then I would not use them, but not like consciously. I would just forget them. And during a cycle where my wrists are less affected, I don't wear them as much because my wrists are constantly recovered, so they're feeling great. But most of the time I'm using them because I just don't feel like aggravating them for no reason.
Exactly. It's just self-preservation.
Yeah. But keep doing your wrist strengthening exercises, the ulnar deviations, compressions, and extensor strengthening and stuff. Just keep doing that because it helps a lot and it'll keep helping you.
Exactly.
So just keep doing that. Next question, Gonzalo Martins. So I read this question, but I couldn't really make sense of it. Maybe you can. What are your thoughts about using crossover symmetry as a shoulder mobility routine after the workouts? I think there's a typo in there. I think there's maybe a typo in there. And let me see.
Here's the thing. If you're using a trade name, you shouldn't expect someone else to know what it is just because
Oh, you mean crossovers? Yeah, okay. I don't know that. No.
So maybe a machine.
Yeah, maybe
I'm just gonna do a Google search. I mean, I have a feeling it's gonna be like one of the free motion type trainers. Let's see.
It's
crossover symmetry. Wait, where am I typing? I was just typing and I don't know where the letter. Oh, right, because I unplugged.
And I think I know what he asks. I think I understand his question. It's like a resistant band with an handle on it. That thing.
Oh, it's a band.
Yeah, it's like a band, and then the exercise they use is basically a lot of shoulder flexion. And
I'm just like it's a cable machine except it's bands.
Yes, basically. And what he's asking is basically, what are your thoughts on that and shoulder mobility?
Well, I don't understand the question. Like the tools?
Yeah, can you use that tool for shoulder mobility? I think is what he's asking. After the workout. So he's asking, okay, let's say you've done a workout.
If you want to. I have trouble understanding that question.
Is it effective to build mobility in your shoulders?
I don't know. I don't know what you're doing. I can't answer that.
Wait.
What do you mean? Is it effective? It's a band. If you use
Well,
it
you
right,
can't
it's
see
just
me. I'm
like
trying
a cable.
to. I don't have a webcam, so Josh can't see me. But I looked up a bunch of exercises. It's a method apparently.
It's just like, yeah,
Here,
I
look.
don't know. I mean, I don't know what they're doing. I don't have time to, you
Can you
know.
see my screen?
I don't know. Hang on. God damn.
Well, basically, it looks like people are like,
Yeah, it's the same thing that I'm looking at. They're just shoulder exercises.
yeah.
It's more of a strengthening thing, so here's the thing. It's very similar to what Ido was doing with his band stuff, what Dylan Zreich was doing with his band stuff, what Yuri teaches with his band. They're all the same, basically. Um, are there band routines that can help with mobility? Sure. Um, but really, the you know, I have to know what somebody's trying to do. I'm not in the habit of giving yes or no answers to things
Hmm.
when I don't have context, because then it's an easy way to say, look at that dumbass Naderman. He said that was good. It's fucking garbage, you know? Um, and so it becomes just easy personal attack stuff. I think about that. I would never, I don't know. I just don't, when you're in a position to where people take what you say seriously, you owe them a lot of discretion. You try and not give a yes or no answer when it's really not appropriate. I would have to sit here and look at what their quote unquote routines are. I mean, there's no answer for this.
Yeah.
It's just a band with a handle. It looks cool. It's just a band. So it's no different than any other band you've ever seen in your life. What's really neat
No,
about it is that you can
it's a
strap it onto
method. It's
things.
definitely a method. So they have this
You know what
routine.
I'm saying?
It's a method.
Um,
It's called a 30-day shoulder fix thing. And what they do is they
uh,
use the bands to do a lot of
they're
shoulder
doing
flexion, and rotator cuff exercises.
Yeah, yeah, exactly,
Mm.
exactly. It's.
A lot of
I mean,
reverse fly stuff like that,
here's the advantage
and
to
they're
what.
good exercises.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is that like I don't know what to tell you here. If you're doing a good set of exercises with the tool, then it's going to help you. But the thing is that a lot of these exercises are easy to do wrong as well, and it can reinforce your problems instead of fixing them. So, you just gotta focus on really, really working on moving well, because these are no different than like leaning over a bench and doing like the YTIs, the W's, all these different, quote unquote scapular and rotator stuff. There's just a different tool to do that exercise while you're standing up. And sometimes
Yeah.
that helps people. Not everybody responds to the same orientation the same way. And the bottom line is that I love tools like this, and the fact that it's portable, you can clip it on to all kinds of different things,
Yeah,
I
that's
think
pretty
is
cool.
wonderful. But you can do the same thing with a lot of cable machines.
Or with
And
resistant bands.
well, yeah, and just regular resistance bands. You don't need this particular tool. Just like all the Lifeline band products that John Hines sells, which are super high quality. All of these things are really the same. And it's funny. I'm looking. I was like, yeah, what I would do is just clip it to my power rack, and that's exactly what they're doing further down on the page. It's really funny.
Yep.
It's so yeah. I mean, I think stuff like that is great. It's just make sure that you're doing the programs right. Like we haven't had time to put all this stuff together. It's
Yeah.
coming. So I think that while you're waiting to see what we prefer, I think finding anything like this that you're able to do correctly, if you like it, is great. There are a lot of band routines you're going to find that a lot of them are all the same, and some of the stuff that they're doing, I'm already seeing, is very similar to the things that we have you do in the finishers, and there are many, many different ways to get what you need. And if this is one that you really like, then I think that you should use it. And if it causes problems, you should do something else. If it helps, you should keep doing it. I mean, that's kind of the bottom line. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, let's move on to the next question.
And in the future, when people ask stuff like that, I would like to say, the crossover symmetry product or like at crossoversymmetry.com, like give me some direction as to where you're going so that I don't spend the first, 3 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever doing Google searches. Help me get where I need to go so that I can give you answers. Because then Yad can also look at stuff first, send me the web page. You know what I'm saying? It'll streamline a lot of this.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm all about product reviews. I'm just, but I can't. I'm not. You're not going to get something good on the fly because I think that's irresponsible. It would be me making a snap judgment, and I think that you should rip me apart for doing something like that because it would not be in your best interest.
Right, man. Next question by Elijah Hansaker. This is a long question. It's a paragraph, and it's directly to you. I understand Josh has a lot of respect for Dr. Stuart McGill, which is well-deserved because he has done great things in the field of spinal research. However, and he's talking about McGill, I find he tends to pigeonhole himself into a purely biomechanical model of pain, which doesn't mesh with our current understanding of pain in the biopsychosocial model we have developed. What is your take on the role of biomechanics and its relation to pain, and how would you translate that to a clinical practice or a coaching practice?
It sounds a lot fancier than it is. So there's two sides of questions. I'm going to break this. I'm going to break this down into something real simple. When you look at pain, it's just communication. That's all it is. So there's two parts to communication. There's the message that's sent, and then there's what it means to the listener. The message is signals from the tissue to the brain. The listener is the brain. That's it. I just want to let that sit for a second. That is all it is. Now, that listening part's very complex. It's about what you pay attention to. There's, what kind of subtypes of receptors were you born with? There are people who are just less sensitive to pain. I'm one of them. There are people who are very sensitive to certain types of sensation and not others, okay? There's a lot of variation. There's also a lot of variation just based purely on, biopsychosocial stuff, which really started in World War II, where they found that people who lost legs saving their friends were found to be in much less pain and much less depression and things like that than people who lost their legs in like a training accident that benefited nobody. So the meaning behind things also helps. So like if you won the Super Bowl and broke your ankle, it's going to hurt a lot less than if you broke your ankle because you were talking to your daughter and slipped off the curb. But it still hurts. The pain is still there. Now you got to understand that what McGill does is more complex than it seems because, with this whole biopsychosocial thing, as soon as you take control and buy into a method and start working on it, you've gained control over the situation, and that makes you feel better. That makes you hurt less. So anything that you do is a part of that. Now, his job is to make sure that your body tissues can heal and that you can learn to keep yourself in a range of motion that does not further aggravate the injuries that you have. And that's why the athletes that he works with are able to go back to competition and set new world records when we know that they're still injured. You know what I'm saying? Because he has basically taught them how to stabilize their injuries, how to progressively accept motion that they need for their sport, right? And that's more than just bottom-up signaling. That's not just altering the message. It is altering the listener. It is allowing your body to ignore louder and louder signals little by little. So there's more going on than you think that there is. What you're really asking, this biopsychosocial stuff, a lot of it, not all of it, but a lot of it is about more chronic things where we know that the tissue has probably had enough time to recover, honestly. And yet this person still has pain, but they think about it a lot. And so that's a complex area. There are people who have more patience than me for working with stuff like that. I'm not discounting its importance, but this is an academic rabbit hole that you could spend the rest of your life in and die unsatisfied in 100 years. So the bottom line is that, your beliefs about pain matter. Your understanding of your injury matters. Your belief about how permanent or fixable it is and how that's going to impact your life and what it means to you, all of that matters. The tissue also matters. Okay, so everything's coming together. And, with the spine, if you are not stabilizing the tissues, then you are putting yourself at risk of permanent nerve damage. Does that make sense? So, especially with spinal injuries, you have got to take the biomechanical stuff in the forefront and make sure that that's taken care of. Is it going to be your whole answer? Probably not. But, he's doing more than that. The whole recovery process is about teaching you that it's okay to move again and that, no, it's not the end of the world if you are a little uncomfortable on a training day. Just ask yourself, am I maintaining my position? Am I doing well? Okay, then it's going to be fine. It's probably going to be gone tomorrow. And you know what? It almost always is. And so that's you'll see things like that in his interactions with his athletes. That's not something that you can put into a book very well when you're also trying to address the biomechanical stuff, because that's personal coaching. It has to be tailored to the individual. It's a lot of back and forth. And so that's really a totally separate area, and it wouldn't work super well, I don't think, to try and do both at the same time in the same video, because people get confused. When you're advanced enough, when you really get it, that's one thing. When you're the patient and somebody's doing this to you in the moment, that's one thing, right? Those two scenarios, you can throw them together. But when you're trying to learn and understand and make sense of things for the first time, doing them all together, you need to separate them. It's kind of like learning math and English at the same time. You shouldn't try and do them all in the same minute. You have one class in the morning and then one class at lunch, and it's not the same thing in both classes. Math for an hour, English for an hour, something like that. And there's progressions, all that, but the idea here is basically that McGill is about the injury recovery. If you have additional factors to your pain, which not everybody has, that's the thing, is like this whole biopsychosocial camp assumes that everybody has these issues, and they don't. Just like people who are pure biomechanists assume that everybody has biomechanical issues, and they don't. And we know that. If anything, we've known for a very long time, and it's very freely acknowledged, that pain often has nothing to do with true tissue deformity. Okay? It's a signaling thing, and that signaling is usually more in the brain than it is in the afferent nerves sending the message. It's interpretation. And so, and again, that's more of a chronic issue or an aggravation of a chronic issue, right? It's when you have an acute injury, that stuff doesn't work so well, because the when your hand is in the fire, let me tell you something. Until those nerves get burned off, you're going to feel it, and it's going to hurt. And I don't care what anybody tells you, and I don't care what you tell yourself. You can tolerate it, but it still hurts, right? Totally different issue. So that's what I have to say with that.
Yeah,
it's a good question. He's not pigeonholing himself. He is, there's a lot of criticisms of him because people love to look for things to be critical about. Anytime somebody is successful, it triggers something in people that make us, and I'm as guilty of it as anybody else. I'm not trying to say I'm immune. I recognize this, is that we all do this. And it's a part of our learning process. And some of it, especially when you haven't accomplished much, it's a self-defensive thing to try and maintain your place. I'm not saying that's what the asker is doing. I'm just saying in terms of human behavior, that's a big one. As people see something, it threatens them inside. They don't recognize it, but it does. And so they have to attack it. Otherwise, it makes them feel inferior. And, it's good to look out for things. I mean, I noticed that in myself. I'm just a person. I'm just a dude. And I actively try and cut those thought patterns out because I don't think that they help me. And it also, they're my warnings saying, hey, you've got more to learn in this area, or you're falling behind or something, and it triggers me, and then I have to go learn, and then I'm better again, as opposed to trying to tear something down and not looking for more. And I don't think that that's what this question or the person asking is doing.
Yeah.
I just think that
all right, man.
They've never worked with a real high level person in those areas, and when you're doing that, they cover everything. It's just that what he's famous for is the biomechanics.
All right, let's move on to the next question because we got like 4 or 5 more. This next question is from Jane Mikinimi. My gym has some strongman equipment.
Yeah.
And farmer handles, yokes, sleds, stuff like that. How could I incorporate these things to my training, and how could I potentially replace some of the leg work with these? He's not really aiming for any competition. He just likes doing them more.
Yeah, I love that stuff. Okay, it's about how much training time you have. What I would do is I would use those things as assistance exercises. Seriously, that's one of the things they're best for. And one of the nice things about a lot of strongman stuff, like the Atlas stones and carrying the Africa rock and a lot of odd stuff, is that if you look at the events, they're mostly endurance events. Even though it's strongman, it's not 1 rep maxes. They're even like with the power stuff, like throwing the barrels over like a 14-foot pole or whatever. How many of those do you have to throw? A lot, right? So I just point that out to kind of explain why I really like stuff like that as assistance exercises. It's a lot of stabilization for the core. The biggest thing that I would say is
what happened to your voice?
Man, people don't realize that I spend 14 hours of my day talking to nurses and really, really sick people who are dying of cancer. So,
that was weird.
That's it happens. Like I said, I am fatigued and strained in more ways than 2.
Rip.
Also, my coffee's cold and my chicken's cold, and that's probably congealing some of the mucus in the back of my throat.
Yeah.
Also not helping. I forgot what the question was. Sorry.
Well, you basically answered it. You're just basically saying use them as accessory work. That's how you would incorporate these things to your training.
Yeah, the big thing with the yokes, especially overhead yoke carries, God, I love those. I think that they are one of the most in fact, the one guy I'm helping with, on monthly consults is a hand balancing base, and we're moving towards doing stuff like that because there is a huge amount of value. Do I think it's fundamental? No. But if the equipment's available, if you have particular weaknesses in certain areas, if you're a guy like that who needs to hold somebody overhead for a long period of time, these things are awesome. Awesome. And they belong in the accessory area.
All right, let's move on to the next question. This next question is by Abdul Ghani Mamon. And he asks, what are good ways to improve work capacity? For example, not needing 3 to 5 minutes rest time between sets of pull-ups, bench press, rows, squat, etc. to fully recover. I want to get to the point where I can rest 45 to 60 seconds to fully recover from a set and not miss reps in the next set. Right now,
I love it.
Yeah, right now it takes me about 8 minutes to recover from a set of pull-ups, and even then I miss a couple of reps in the next set. Well,
All
maybe
right, so
doing
two
too
things.
much for that one. Yeah.
Well, the
you
first thing is that what you want are robot arms and robot legs. That's your only solution.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. When you're working heavy and you're working close to your volume limit, you are depleting the creatine phosphate system and you're building up a lot of heat and you're building up a lot of intracellular metabolites from glucose metabolism. Those three things take time. All by itself, the creatine system takes 3 to 5 minutes to be fully recharged. It really takes 5. Sometimes it takes longer. Kind of depends on where you're at in the workout, how strong you are, and how far you pushed. So, and the heat buildup is also a thing. You're going to get fatigued when you overheat. So some of it could be environmental. Some of it could be poor hydration. One of the things that actually does help, though, is just chewing on 1 or 2 jelly beans. It's just a variation I did before I knew about carb rinsing. I still think it's one of the best ways to go. Carbohydrates in your mouth increase peak power, and they reduce perceived fatigue. And just in general, especially as the workouts go on, they make things work better. And it has absolutely nothing to do with your blood sugar or sparing glycogen or anything. It's a purely neurological phenomenon, and it's fascinating, and we're still learning about it. I picked it up from an old pro bodybuilder in like a very old issue of some crap or other muscle mag when I was in the Navy. And it was a little sidebar, like page 70 or something. And it just was this, I think it was Derek James. And he just said, I used to just have like a couple Skittles in my workout. And so I tried that, but the Skittles had too much acid for me. Like it would make my stomach upset after a couple of sets. So I tried jelly beans and they were magic. All of a sudden, 2-3 hour workouts didn't suck anymore. And I've used that since. I've always liked that. I've talked about it a lot. So that's one strategy. The other is that, when you're working on strength, you're always going to need, there is no, I could say this all day long in every language. There is no way to prevent long rest periods. However, if you want shorter rest periods in a mass cycle, it just means that you are going to do one of two things. You're either going to reduce the weight that you're using, or you're going to continually reduce the weight between sets, essentially doing ladders of weight, right? So you might be doing 10 reps of wearing 30 kilos, and then 10 reps of wearing 15 kilos, and then 10 reps of wearing 5 kilos. And like each time you have your rest period and you say, I want to do 60 pull-ups this workout. And so you just keep reducing the weight, and your last 10 might be on an assistance machine. You just make sure that, on each of those sets, you're tracking your reps, and you do the rest pause thing that we do to add a rep. And that really takes care of a lot. Those are two strategies, but you're still human. You're always going to be human. And some people are not blessed with super fast recovery. Those same people are usually blessed with unusual amounts of fast twitch muscle. Not always, but often. So I don't know you. I haven't trained you. I don't know what you do. It's very hard for me to be specific, but those are to recap: jelly beans, staying hydrated, having ice water, working out in a cool environment, and, during mass cycles, using a drop set technique or kind of a stair step ladder where the second set is lighter than the first set. As long as you're making sure that the majority of your work is in that hypertrophy zone, like 60% 1 rep max or higher, you're going to be fine. You know what I'm saying? So that's the deal. And you may also just say, you know what? Doesn't matter. I've got a total number of reps I'm doing. That's it. Right? Like if I have 5 plus 2 for 5 sets, that's 5 times 5, 25, plus 2 times 5, 10, 35 total reps this week for my workout, right? Get those 35 reps. If you start doing 2 reps and then rest 45 seconds and then 2 more and you just do that forever, whatever. That's, you're hitting your goals, you're exposing your muscle to the stimulus that sends the signal. And that's what it takes. So there's a lot of different ways to get there. What you're asking for is not necessarily realistic the way that you're asking for it. So you would have to change the way that you approach your workouts. And, again, there's a lot of this stuff that's coming. It's probably not going to come this year because it is it takes time to set up the framework for all of that, and there's other things that need to be finished first.
All right. Moving on to the next question by John Bjornar Kaiser. He says, "Hello, beautiful people." Well, stop it. He says,
He must be listening to audio only.
Probably. This is one of our audio listeners. I wonder how much I should elevate the scapula when I practice the handstand. I heard that full elevation. I have near full elevation, I have near full elevation, but does that mean maximum contraction of the upper traps with a Z, or that I should be able to hold that maximum position? Best regards from Norway.
You should just be stable. Those are things that people really focus on that I think are not super important. You need to have a comfortable shoulder position that you are able to hold. No matter how elevated or depressed you are, those same muscles are working. It's just a different position. And if you feel better pushing really, really hard, that's great. Do it. If you are more, so you're always going to have some elevation like that. A lot of people screw their shoulders up trying to do handstands in a depressed position. It's not the best idea. You really want to be just kind of in this neutral to somewhat elevated position. And you got to remember, neutral is still halfway elevated, right? So, you're just rotating up. And so really it's just the upward rotation. And as long as you don't feel pinching in your shoulders, guess what? You're there. So I would experiment. I would see what cues make you feel the most stable in your handstand. And, first you want to start with the balance point thing. You need to know where, and when we talk about the balance point, that's where the weight's centered. It's not the place that you're trying to balance from. It's just where, if everything was reduced to one place, where would that weight be? So it means 10% on each finger, and maybe like a little bit on the outside of the hand, a little bit on the inside of the hand with the thumb, a little bit on the palm, heel, and it's all distributed everywhere, but the center mathematically is right there kind of under the wrist. And from there, you just line your body up. Your body is going to be in the position it needs to be in. From there, if you have to push up a little, through the shoulders, that's fine. Everybody's built differently. They feel it differently. They interpret differently. They think differently. So I don't want to sit there and pigeonhole all the other users into thinking, oh my gosh, I'm not doing what Naderman just said, so I must be wrong. If your handstand is strong and stable, you're doing a good job.
That's it.
If not, you need to, maybe you do need to push up a little more. Not because there's something better about it. It's just that relative to somebody else, they don't think they're pushing up more, but they are. So maybe you have to focus on that for a little bit. And after a couple of months, you realize, I just don't feel as like I'm pushing up as hard, but I'm still in the same position that I was when I was pushing hard. You just got stronger. You got used to it. Now you're experiencing it more like those other people do. And all of a sudden, when you reflect on that, you realize, oh, okay, I was just in a different place back then. So that's it. I mean, if it helps you, then sure, I think you should push more. If it doesn't help you, then I don't think that you should.
All right, moving on to the next question by Alexander Eaglebuck. There he is again. Hey, man. If I want to spend a little time trying to increase my 1RM in dips while at the same time still progressing my normal hypertrophy/strength training, how would one go about doing that? I tested my 1RM one year back with a 65 kilo, which is around 80% of my body weight, but have not practiced dips since then. I personally don't see why you should ever do 1RMs if you're not competing 1RMs. That's my personal opinion. I used to do them in the past because it was like, well, look at this. But nowadays I'm more impressed by doing like a 5RM or like an 8RM. Maybe because I'm older
totally
now.
Agree.
But I feel like it interferes too much with your training. It's just a waste of time. You're fatiguing yourself for no reason.
Yeah,
it's not. It's not going to benefit you. One thing that I'll say
is this: let's say that for whatever reason, somebody is in Alex's position and they've spent the year doing all this other stuff. One, your one RM has gone up for sure, 100%.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want to prove it to yourself, then your dip might be your horizontal press for the purposes of the strength cycle, the peaking cycle, rather, that people are going into, for the first group is in now. And do I think that it is the best way to do things in terms of long-term benefit? No, but that doesn't always matter. If you have something that means something to you and you say, you know what, I want to spend
That's
8
true.
weeks easing myself in just to prove to myself that I've done this, or I'm used to bragging about this. I want to know how much it's gone up. Then, you spend 8 to 12 weeks in a proper peaking cycle for that lift. You just have to dial the other things for upper body back so you don't interfere. That's what you do.
That's the most important part. If you're gonna do it, do it in a cycle that's made for it. Don't do it while doing your hypertrophy training or strength training. Just plan for it.
Right.
Plan for it. Don't let it interfere. And that's why. And also, it brings up another question: how often do you want to do a peaking cycle if you don't compete? Which is a whole question on its own. Exactly. So a peaking cycle on its own is unless it's fun, and and I'll have to say it's really fun. It really is, and I'll probably end up doing that probably somewhere next year or at the end of this year, depending on my injuries. But it always comes down to the long-term thing, and and like Josh mentioned, if you like doing that, you should do it, but just do it when it's appropriate. That's the most important thing. And that's it. Moving on to the next question. By the way, I'm gonna do one arms. Don't when I do my one arm, don't get mad at me. But I won't do them in my hypertrophy or mass cycle, or strength cycle. So don't get mad at me when I do them, okay? Because I also, I want to check it also every now and then.
Yeah, people want to know, and when you do it, you got to be smart. Remember, it's not a competition. There's no prize waiting for you when you've already pushed hard and you try to push a little harder. Just be happy with some progress. It's also risky. Yeah,
it's also risky.
Every
one RM is a
for
chance.
Self-tears.
Exactly, and there's also a thing like a true 1RM where you actually push yourself to that limit, and where you barely make it. Your body's like so stressed from that, you actually have to recover for weeks. Yeah. And then there's a 1RM where you just try it out, and you're like, it's more like a 95% of 1RM.
Yeah, it's only
exactly, and there's a huge difference between those two, fatigue wise. Like it's huge. So I would always never do an actual true 1RM if you're not competing at a high level. That's what I say.
The true 1RM does a lot more damage than you realize.
It's only 5% difference with an actual 1RM, and it's huge. That 5% matters a lot.
Yeah, a lot of times in real strong people, it's less than that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Seriously, and that's the thing, So that's I would just go for a comfortable single that is like an 8 or a 9 out of 10 effort, and that's hard. Yeah. Like
that's still hard.
You don't hit 10 out of 10, and be happy. Don't keep trying to repeat it. Don't do it again for like another year. Like give yourself the time to develop.
Yeah. Right. That brings me to the next question by Mauro Gomez Alvarez. I'm currently doing the 4-day strength cycle, including back squats and deadlifts. During the 3rd week, I'm only going to be able to train from Monday to Thursday. Should I try to do everything in 4 consecutive days, or should I repeat that week later on, or something else? I think it's fine.
Do that.
Yeah, it's fine. Like
you might be a little fatigued. It's okay.
It's nothing.
You just
terrible.
Adjust. Yeah, you may
fine.
find
Don't worry
that.
About it,
yeah, that's kind of the bottom line.
That's basically the answer. Don't worry about it. Just do it. It's cool.
Yeah, and if you find like on that 3rd or 4th workout or whatever that you feel a little weaker that day, like on the 3rd and the 4th days, then either take a little more rest between the sets or break the sets apart a little bit so that you're using the same weight for the same total reps. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, just treat.
But other than that, it's fine.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to the last question. We sort of did a sprint right there. Steven Soyle. He's actually Steven Soy. He's actually one of the consultant guys I'm doing, and he came up with this question during one of the consults, and we both agreed that it's a better question for the podcast. And it's it's this a question. I'm a regular blood donor. I donate every 3 months and sometimes more regularly due to hemochromatosis, which is iron overload. Yeah.
Yep.
I do suffer from fatigue in the first few days after the donation, which affects my training. But in the long term, would muscle growth and strength gain be affected by the regular loss of blood?
No. No, it will not. Won't matter at all. I'm serious.
Okay. Yeah, that's it.
I don't. Yeah,
I'm not
that's
used
like
to
one
you.
of the rare. Those are one of the rare yes or no answers.
And
No.
is it because
First
it's
off, dude is a hero. You have no idea how much blood gets used every day. And one of the cool things, I don't know what other countries do this, but I found out recently that Sweden, when you donate blood, I'm sure you have to let them do this, but they will send you a text message or an email or something anytime one of the units of your blood gets used so that you know that you just saved somebody.
That's so dope.
Isn't it? That's one of the
so
coolest
cool.
things I've ever heard in my life. That is badass.
Like imagine Steven, because he does it every 3 months. He's like, oh, saved another life.
Yeah.
That'd be so dope. Yeah, you probably saved a lot of lives,
he's saving
man.
2 lives. He's saving his life and he's saving somebody
in that case,
else.
yeah. But he's saving a lot of lives, man, if he's been doing this for years.
Yeah.
Well, that's it, man. That's the wrap. We did it. We answered every question once again.
We have a good question actually that just popped up 44 minutes ago, like during the podcast on the lab.
On the Reddit lab?
Yeah. I just randomly went there. There's one thing I wanted to bring up. There's a couple of things, but Boss Batman.
There, yeah.
Yeah, cool guy. He's just getting started with us, and he was saying, I don't understand age-based muscle loss. I've heard that men over the age of 30 lose 1% of muscle mass per year, and that number increases to 2% after the age 40. He's trying to he's really new to a lot of this stuff, and he's just trying to figure out, like, he's learning a lot, and so he's asking a lot of questions on there, and it's getting answers. And some of the things that are popping around from other users are great. Some are a little questionable, and that's normal. That's just how internet conversation goes, and everybody learns from it. So his question is really interesting. So the short version is that it doesn't have to happen. That sarcopenia is a word that is just used. It just means that your muscle mass wastes away. What it means is that when you're in your 20s, even if you don't work out all that much, your muscle mass doesn't really change a whole lot. The truth is that after puberty, it slowly starts going down. If you really look at the graphs, it is a steady downward slope after the age of like 16 to 20, depending on when you stop puberty. It's just that after the age of 40, the slope changes and becomes a little steeper. You lose a little more. Some say that that's like a hormonal thing. I'm not sure that's totally true. I think it's more of a neurological thing. Our body is pruning neural connections our entire lives. What you don't use, you really do lose. And the same thing is true for muscle mass. When you're working out, you keep it, and it can grow. And when you stop working out, it starts fading away. And after a certain point, it can go bye-bye. And what happens in later life is that our body starts pruning so you have the same number of muscle fibers, but instead of having like 3 nerves responsible for controlling like 100 muscle fibers, one of those nerve cells kind of gets cut off for reasons we don't totally understand. And now there's only 2, and that makes old people a little jerkier. It makes them harder to control fine motions. And it does not happen if you keep using those nerves. So when you're sedentary and you don't work out and you don't practice anything, you don't play sports, you're not really using those skills, and then you try and do them again for the first time 30 years later, they're very degenerated, and there's only so much you can get back. But if you maintain your entire life and you just keep working out and keep doing stuff, they don't really go away until your 60s or 70s, and it's much, much slower. So that's kind of the thing, is that and there's a lot going on there. Part of it is nutritional stuff too. We know that as we age, we start becoming a little more resistant to the anabolic effects of low dose leucine, and so protein dose per meal becomes a little more important. There's new research showing that like senior citizens should be getting at least 1.5 grams of protein per kilo per day. Same thing for pregnant women, interestingly enough. And, this is not going to be in guidelines for 10 or 20 years, I'm sure. It takes a long time for that to change. But that's kind of what we're looking at, is that, like, for Boss, because he's 48, I would say that, he should absolutely be making sure that the vast majority of his protein intake happens in doses of at least 30 grams. And, that's where supplements become important. He also is doing the right things. He's working out. And the cool thing is there's new research that just came out, I want to say it was a couple months ago, that showed pretty conclusively that even if you never worked out until your 40s, that you can still make awesome, awesome gains. And that, 50s, 60s, 70s, doesn't matter what age, that you are still going to have a great response, and that the health benefits seem to be more or less identical to the benefits that come from exercising your entire life. So there is, that's the new part. The muscle stuff is old
Dad,
news.
Time to work out.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny, like my dad's been getting around the farm. He gets out for like hours every day, making piles of sticks and like clearing land and stuff. He's 87. He looks, like 10 years younger. He really looks fantastic. And he feels better. He's mentally much sharper. Like it's amazing. It's really been a blessing in disguise, to be where we're at. And that's a lot of why I put up with, my inherent life difficulties, is that there's a lot that you don't see, and it's not always worth talking about. But, there are reasons why I put myself through what I do. And that's one of them, He and my mom really worked their asses off, and they went without for many years to make sure that me and my sister had what we need and what we wanted. And, I feel like he deserves to be in a place where he can thrive, not just a place that gives him medication 3 times a day, and has a little garden in a square courtyard that's 50 feet across. And I think that all those nursing facilities are really fantastic. They're a hell of a lot better than dying alone on the toilet in, whoever's house. But, when I have the ability to give him something that is really impossible to do on an institutional level. And so I do. And it makes my life a lot harder. And that's totally cool.
All right,
there
man.
was one.
Yeah.
Well, this is going a little longer, but there was. I'm pulling my Reddit up and going to my messages because there was a really neat.
Should we maybe save that for the next?
Well, you can chop this up. I don't really care. There was somebody asked something that doesn't matter. Something. Stuff from Boss. Okay, this is one. Let's see. This one I'll have to do in a separate podcast. It's a lot of specific stuff.
That's what I'm saying.
Coming out of a shoulder injury, and I just don't have the energy to do it well.
Yeah. Let's just wrap it up, man.
Anything else. But I think we're in a good spot.
Yeah, we're 90 minutes almost, so it's like the longest podcast so far. So let's just wrap it up. Sound good? Yeah?
Yeah, man. Well, we addressed a lot of stuff. Some of them were very like nebulous, complex questions.
Yeah. All right, guys. Thank you for listening. That was another podcast, number 6. And, keep sending your questions in, and we'll keep answering them. And we'll see you on the next podcast. Later.
Thanks for listening, people.